The chamber went silent the moment Emperor Voraxis pointed at me. I stood near the back wall of the Grand Concord Hall, wearing the plain gray uniform of a human attaché, watching 1,000 eyes from 100 different worlds turn in my direction. My heart pounded so hard I was sure the delegates closest to me could hear it. I had trained for years to keep my face calm during moments like this. It did not help much today. "Bring the human forward," Voraxis said, his voice amplified through the translation crystals hanging from the domed ceiling. He was tall, silver-skinned, with eyes like burning coins. Every movement he made looked practiced, designed to remind everyone in the room who ruled the strongest empire among the stars. I walked forward, because refusing was not an option. My boots echoed against the polished floor. I stopped exactly 3 steps from the raised platform where he sat, surrounded by his personal guards, their armor catching the light like sharpened glass. "Tell me, young one," Voraxis said, leaning forward slightly. "How many warships does your species command?" I kept my voice steady. "Our fleet numbers are classified, Your Eminence." A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the hall. Delegates from the Threnari cluster whispered behind clawed hands. A cluster of insectoid diplomats from the Ver Collective clicked their mandibles in amusement. Voraxis smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Classified. What a polite way to say nothing at all. He rose from his seat, his robes sweeping the floor. "Let me save you the trouble of hiding it. Your species has no true fleet. No war record beyond your own small, sad planet. You crawled into this Concord because we allowed it, out of curiosity, nothing more." My jaw tightened. I said nothing. "Humanity is weak," Voraxis continued, turning now to address the entire chamber, his voice rising with practiced authority. "They have no shields worth mentioning, no weapons that could scratch a Krynith hull, no unity beyond fragile agreements that could shatter with one hard year, and yet they sit among true powers, at this table, as if they earned the right." The chamber murmured its agreement. I felt heat crawl up my neck, not from embarrassment, but from something closer to anger, held on a very tight leash. "I propose," Voraxis said, "that the human seat on this council be reviewed, perhaps removed. A species without strength has no place shaping decisions that affect the strong." Several delegates began nodding. A representative from the Orlun Assembly raised a translucent hand in support. The room was turning, slowly, like a tide pulling away from the shore, and I stood there, as the only human voice in a hall built for giants. I could have argued. I could have listed the treaties Earth signed, the trade routes we built, the small contributions our scientists had made to Concord medicine. All of it was true. All of it would have sounded like begging. Instead, I did the only thing my training told me to do. I bowed my head slightly, the correct diplomatic gesture, and said, "The council may vote as it sees fit. Earth accepts the will of this body." Voraxis studied me for a long moment, clearly disappointed that I had not given him a stronger reaction to enjoy. "Interesting," he said. "Weak, but not stupid. Perhaps that is the best your kind can offer." More laughter. I turned and walked back to my place along the wall, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind me, the council began debating the future of humanity's seat, as if we were a topic on a shopping list, not a species that had bled and struggled and survived, worse than any of them could imagine. I do not remember much of what was said after that. My mind was somewhere else, replaying the Emperor's words, feeling them settle into my chest like stones. Weak, no true fleet, no war record, a species without strength. He believed every word of it, so did most of the room. That was, in a strange way, exactly what we needed him to believe. When the session ended, I did not wait for the formal dismissal. I slipped out through a side corridor, reserved for lower-ranking staff, moving quickly past patrol drones and curious glances from alien clerks. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of holding back everything I wanted to say in that chamber. I reached the small transport bay assigned to the human delegation and climbed into my personal shuttle, sealing the hatch behind me. Only then did I let my shoulders drop. My name is Daniel Cross. I was 28 years old, and for the past 6 years I had lived a double life. To the Concord, I was a minor diplomat, barely worth noticing, sent to sit quietly in meetings and nod at decisions made by more important species. To the people who actually mattered to me, I was something else entirely. My wristcom buzzed. A single alert, marked with a security clearance I was not supposed to have as a simple attaché. I glanced around the shuttle bay out of habit, even though I knew the cabin was shielded from outside sensors. Then I opened the message. It was short. No greeting, no explanation. Just 11 words that made my pulse jump. Protocol Lazarus is authorized. Report to Coordinate 7 immediately. I read it twice to make sure I understood it correctly. Then I sat back in my seat and let out a slow breath. For 6 years, I had waited for this message. I had trained for it, prepared for it, dreamed about it, during long nights on this cold, glittering station so far from home. Protocol Lazarus was not a word anyone in the Concorde had ever heard. It existed only in the memories of a small number of humans who had sworn, on penalty of everything they held dear, never to speak of it outside a very short list of secured locations. I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing my grandmother's face. She used to tell me stories about the early days, back when humanity first encountered a hostile fleet near the edge of our solar system, decades before I was born. She told me how close we came to losing everything. How our leaders realized, in the space of a single terrifying week, that the galaxy was not a place that rewarded honesty or good intentions. It was a place that rewarded strength, and punished anyone foolish enough to reveal their weaknesses too soon. She told me how, after that, our governments made a choice. In public, Earth would remain humble, cooperative, unremarkable. We would join the Concorde, as the smallest, quietest member, asking for nothing, drawing no attention. In private, we would prepare. I opened my eyes and looked at the message glowing on my wristcom one more time. Then I input the launch sequence for my shuttle, setting a course that no flight log would ever record honestly. The public route would show a routine supply run to a research outpost near the outer rim. The truth was something else entirely. As the shuttle's engines hummed to life beneath me, I allowed myself, for the first time since stepping into that Concorde chamber, to smile. Emperor Varaxis wanted to know how many warships humanity commanded. He was about to receive his answer. The shuttle pulled away from the station, sliding silently past the massive hulls of Concorde cruisers, their crews unaware that the small, unremarkable human vessel drifting past them carried something far more important than cargo. It carried a decision, a trigger, long planned, finally pulled. I watched the station shrink behind me through the rear viewport, its lights blinking like a field of distant stars. Somewhere inside that station, Emperor Varaxis was probably already forgetting about me, moving on to the next item on his agenda, confident that he had put another weak species firmly in its place. I set the shuttle's navigation for deep space, entering a sequence of coordinates that existed on no official Concorde chart. The engines shifted pitch as we left the traffic lanes, heading toward a region of space the Concorde believed was empty, abandoned, not worth a second look. They were wrong about that too. I leaned back in my seat, watching the stars blur slightly as the shuttle accelerated, and thought about everything that was coming. The years of secrecy, the training, the ships built in shadows, hidden behind asteroid fields and old mining stations that no one bothered to inspect closely. All of it had been building toward a single moment. Somewhere out there, past the edge of what any alien sensor could detect, an entire fleet was waking up. And I was flying straight toward it. Coordinate 7 was not a place you found by accident. My shuttle dropped out of transit space into what looked like nothing at all. No stations, no beacons, no drifting debris to mark a location worth visiting. Just black space and distant starlight, the kind of view that made most travelers assume they had made a navigation error and turned back. I did not turn back. I flew straight ahead, watching my sensors carefully, waiting for the signal only a handful of people in the galaxy knew how to send. 3 minutes later, space itself seemed to fold open in front of me. It was not magic, of course. It was technology, decades of human ingenuity, poured into a single cloaking field, powerful enough to hide something the size of a small moon. As the field dropped away, I saw it for the first time in person, not in briefings, not in simulations, but with my own eyes. A shipyard. Enormous, silent, and completely invisible to every alien scanner in the galaxy. I had grown up hearing stories about this place. I had imagined it 1,000 times as a child, lying awake, picturing what my parents and grandparents had built while pretending to the rest of the galaxy that humanity had nothing worth hiding. Nothing could have prepared me for actually seeing it. Massive docking arms stretched out from a central structure larger than any Concorde station I had ever visited. Ships hung in careful rows along its length, sleek and dark, their hulls designed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I counted at least 30 before I lost track, and I understood immediately that what I was looking at was only a small part of something much bigger. My comm crackled. Shuttlecross 7, you are cleared for docking bay 12. Welcome home, Daniel. I recognized the voice immediately. Elena Marsh, my old training instructor from the academy. None of us were allowed to name in public records. I felt a rush of relief hearing her voice again after months apart. Copy that, I said, guiding the shuttle toward the indicated bay. It is good to hear your voice, Elena. Wait until you see what we have been building, she replied. Then tell me if it is still good. The shuttle settled gently onto the docking platform, and the bay doors sealed behind me with a soft hiss of pressurized air. I unbuckled my harness and stepped out, my boots meeting solid metal deck for the first time in what felt like forever. Elena was waiting for me, arms crossed, a faint smile on her face. She looked older than I remembered, streaks of gray now running through her dark hair, but her eyes held the same sharp focus they always had. You look tired, she said, studying my face. The Emperor called humanity weak in front of the entire Concorde today, I said. It has been a long day. Her smile faded slightly, replaced by something harder. Then you are about to feel a lot better, she said, gesturing for me to follow her. Come on, there is someone who wants to brief you personally, and after that, I think you will want to see the fleet with your own eyes. We walked through corridors that hummed with quiet activity. Engineers moved past us carrying components I did not recognize, their conversations filled with technical terms that belonged to a level of engineering the rest of the galaxy had no idea humanity possessed. Somewhere below us, I could feel a faint vibration through the deck plating, the unmistakable rhythm of massive engines being tested. How long has this station been operational? I asked. Officially, it does not exist, Elena said. Unofficially, the first sections were completed almost 40 years ago. Your grandmother helped design part of the original shielding system, actually. I stopped walking for a moment, surprised. She never told me that. She was not allowed to, Elena said simply. None of us were. That was the entire point. We reached a set of reinforced doors that slid open as we approached, revealing a command center filled with screens, holographic displays, and quiet, focused personnel. At the center of the room stood a man I recognized from old classified files I had only glimpsed once during my final training review. Admiral Owen Blake, one of the founding architects of what the recruits simply called the Long Watch. He turned as we entered, his expression calm but alert. Attaché Cross, he said. I have read the summit transcript. The Emperor gave quite a speech. He did, I said. The Council is voting on whether to remove Earth's seat entirely. Blake nodded slowly, unsurprised. That confirms what our analysts predicted. His ambition has finally outgrown his patience. He gestured toward a large display showing a slowly rotating star map, dozens of markers scattered across it in careful formation. For years, the Krynith Dominion has been testing weaker Concorde members, absorbing their territory, piece by piece, while hiding behind diplomatic language. Earth was simply the next name on his list. Except we are not weak, I said. No, Blake agreed. We never were. We simply chose, decades ago, never to prove it until the moment truly demanded it. He turned to face me directly. That moment has arrived, Daniel. Voraxis has publicly declared humanity unworthy of a seat at the table. He intends to use that declaration to justify moving his fleet into our territory, under the excuse of enforcing Concorde order. My stomach tightened. He is preparing to attack Earth. He is preparing to occupy Earth, Blake corrected. In his mind, there will be no real fight involved. He believes he is dealing with a species incapable of meaningful resistance. A faint, grim smile crossed his face. We intend to correct that assumption. Elena stepped closer to the star map, tapping a section near the outer edge of our solar system. Our long-range sensors picked up Krynith battle groups shifting position 6 hours ago, she said. Their public statements call it a routine patrol adjustment. Our analysis suggests otherwise. How much time do we have? I asked. Days, not weeks, Blake said. Which is why Protocol Lazarus has been authorized. Every hidden shipyard, every training facility, every reserve unit humanity has built in secret for the past several decades is being activated at this moment. You are not simply here for a briefing, Daniel. You are here because your training record, combined with your first-hand knowledge of the summit proceedings, makes you uniquely suited for an active command role in what comes next. I felt my pulse quicken, a mixture of nerves and something close to pride. I understand. Blake studied me for a long moment, then gave a short nod. Good. Because in less than 72 hours, the entire galaxy is going to learn exactly how wrong Emperor Voraxis was. He turned back toward the star map, where the markers representing humanity's hidden fleet glowed steadily in the darkness, patient and ready, waiting for the order that would finally bring them out of the shadows. Walk with me, Blake said. It is time you saw exactly what we have been protecting all these years. We left the command center and moved toward a long observation corridor lined with reinforced viewports. As we walked, Blake spoke quietly, almost as if reciting something he had repeated many times before. After the first hostile encounter, our leaders faced an impossible choice, he said. Reveal our full capability immediately and risk provoking a war we were not ready to fight, or hide everything and buy ourselves the time needed to grow strong enough to survive whatever came next. They chose to hide. That must have been an incredibly difficult decision, I said. It was, Blake agreed. It meant generations of engineers, scientists, and soldiers living quiet, ordinary lives on the surface, while secretly dedicating everything they had to a project most of them would never live to see completed. It meant families kept apart, careers built entirely on lies, entire portions of our history rewritten for public record. He paused at the end of the corridor, standing before a final set of doors. It meant trusting that when the moment finally came, it would be worth it. The doors slid open. I stepped through, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Stretching out before me, illuminated by the soft light of a distant sun, was humanity's true fleet. Hundreds of warships hung in careful formation, their hulls dark and elegant, built from technology that borrowed the best ideas from a dozen alien civilizations and improved upon every single one of them. Fighters moved between the larger vessels in practiced patrol patterns. Support ships carried supplies between docking stations that stretched farther than I could see. This was not the humanity the Concord believed existed. This was not weak. This was not fragile. This was patient, disciplined, ready. Emperor Voraxis called us weak in front of the entire galaxy today, Blake said quietly, standing beside me. Let him keep believing that a little longer. I stared out at the fleet, feeling the weight of everything I had just learned settle into place. Not for much longer, I said. Blake allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. No, he agreed. Not for much longer at all. The alarm woke me from a restless sleep, sharp and insistent, cutting through the quiet hum of the station like a blade. I sat up immediately, my training taking over before my mind had fully caught up. Red emergency lighting bathed my small quarters, and a synthesized voice repeated the same message over and over through the intercom system. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. I dressed quickly, pulling on the black uniform that had replaced my diplomatic attire the moment I arrived at the shipyard 3 days earlier. My hands moved automatically, fastening clasps and checking equipment, while my mind raced through every briefing I had absorbed since Protocol Lazarus began. 3 days had passed since Admiral Blake showed me the fleet for the first time. 3 days of intense training, strategy sessions, and long nights spent studying tactical simulations, alongside officers who had spent their entire careers preparing for a moment none of us truly believed would arrive so soon. Apparently, it had arrived anyway. I stepped into the corridor and found it filled with crew members, moving briskly toward their assigned posts, their faces set with calm determination rather than panic. Years of training had clearly prepared them for exactly this moment. I fell into step beside a young officer I recognized from the tactical briefings, a woman named Sophie Bennett, who nodded at me without slowing her pace. Krynith Battlefleet detected at the edge of the system 2 hours ago, she said, answering the question I had not yet asked. Admiral Blake ordered full activation the moment their formation confirmed hostile intent. How large is the fleet? I asked. Large enough that Voraxis clearly expects no resistance at all, she said grimly. We reached the main command deck, where Admiral Blake stood at the center of a room, now buzzing with focused activity. Screens displayed real-time sensor data, showing the Krynith fleet as a cluster of red markers steadily advancing toward the edge of human territory. Elena Marsh stood near the main console, coordinating communications between our scattered shipyards and reserve units. Blake turned as I entered, his expression sharp and alert. "Attaché Cross," he said, using my old title out of habit. "Glad you made it. You will be joining the command crew aboard the Endeavour, our lead flagship. Elena will brief you during transit." "Understood," I said, though my chest tightened slightly at the mention of an actual flagship assignment. 3 days of training had prepared me academically, but nothing could fully prepare a person for their first real battle. Elena caught my expression and offered a small, reassuring nod. "You will do fine, Daniel. Trust your training." We moved quickly through the station toward the transport bay, where a sleek personnel shuttle waited to carry us to the Endeavour. As we boarded, I glanced through the viewport one final time at the massive shipyard we were leaving behind, watching as ship after ship began peeling away from their docking stations, forming into precise defensive formations. The scale of it took my breath away. What had been hidden for decades was now moving openly, deliberately, with a coordinated purpose that made the earlier stillness of the shipyard feel like nothing more than a held breath before a shout. The shuttle ride to the Endeavour took only a few minutes, but they felt much longer. Elena used the time to walk me through tactical protocols, reminding me of communication procedures and emergency contingencies, though I suspected she was also using the conversation to keep my mind steady and focused, rather than spiraling into anxious thoughts about what lay ahead. When we finally docked with the Endeavour, I stepped aboard humanity's flagship for the first time, immediately struck by the quiet efficiency of its crew. Officers moved with calm precision, each person clearly aware of their role, each system humming with barely contained power beneath the surface. Admiral Blake had transferred ahead of us and was already standing at the central command platform when we arrived, studying a massive holographic display that showed both fleets clearly for the first time. The Krynith formation appeared as an enormous wall of crimson markers, disciplined and confident, advancing steadily toward the edge of our solar system. Our own fleet, arranged in careful defensive positions, appeared far smaller by comparison, though I now understood that appearances could be deeply deceiving. "They still believe this will be a simple show of force," Blake said, without turning around. "Their sensors have detected our ships, but their analysis suggests we possess technology decades behind their own. They expect us to surrender before a single shot is fired." "They are wrong," I said quietly. "Yes," Blake agreed. "They are about to learn exactly how wrong." He turned to address the entire command deck, his voice carrying easily across the room. "All stations, this is Admiral Blake. In a few moments, the Krynith fleet will attempt open communication, likely demanding our immediate surrender. We will allow that message through. Humanity has spent decades preparing for this exact moment, and I intend for the galaxy to understand precisely what that preparation means." A tense silence settled over the command deck as we waited. Minutes passed, each one stretching uncomfortably long, until finally, the main display shifted, showing an incoming transmission request from the lead Krynith vessel. Blake nodded toward the communications officer. "Patch it through." The screen flickered, revealing the sharp, silver features of a Krynith commander I did not recognize, though his uniform bore markings that suggested significant rank within Voraxis's personal fleet. "Humans," the commander said, his voice cold and dismissive. "By order of Emperor Voraxis, your Concord seat has been revoked. This system will submit to Krynith authority, immediately, or face complete military occupation. You have no fleet capable of resisting us. Surrender now, and your species may be permitted to survive as a subject world." The command deck remained silent, every officer waiting for Blake's response. Blake stepped forward, his expression calm, almost pleasant, which somehow made his next words feel even more powerful. "This is Admiral Owen Blake, commanding Earth's defense fleet," he said. "Your Emperor made a mistake today. He assumed silence meant weakness. He was wrong." He gave a small nod toward the tactical officer standing nearby. "Drop the cloaking fields," Blake said. "Show them everything." Across the entire formation, hundreds of additional ships shimmered into visibility, doubling, then tripling the apparent size of humanity's fleet within seconds. The Krynith commander's confident expression faltered, his eyes widening as sensor readings scrolled rapidly across his own display, revealing a force far larger and far more advanced than anything his intelligence reports had prepared him for. "This is not a negotiation," Blake continued, his voice steady and firm. "This is a warning. Turn your fleet around, return to Krynith space, and inform your Emperor that humanity's seat on the Concord Council is not his to remove. If you choose to advance instead, you will discover exactly how weak we truly are." The transmission cut abruptly from the other side, the Krynith commander clearly unwilling to continue the conversation once his advantage had vanished. Silence lingered on the command deck for a long moment before Elena finally spoke. "They are not turning around," she said, studying the tactical display. "Fleet formation shows continued advance, weapon systems now active." Blake's jaw tightened slightly, though his composure never wavered. "Then Voraxis has chosen his answer for us." He turned toward the assembled command crew, his voice carrying the full weight of decades of preparation finally reaching their intended purpose. "All ships, prepare for engagement," he said. "Today, the galaxy learns the truth about humanity." I gripped the edge of the console in front of me, my heart pounding, adrenaline sharpening every one of my senses. Around me, officers moved into position with calm, practiced efficiency, weapon systems powering up across the entire fleet. Through the main viewport, I watched as the distant Krynith formation grew steadily larger, their advanced warships gleaming with confident, deadly purpose. They believed they were about to crush a weak, disorganized species incapable of real resistance. They had no idea what was actually waiting for them. The first weapons fire lit up the darkness of space only minutes later, distant flashes of light marking the opening moments of a battle that would change everything the galaxy believed about humanity. I took a steadying breath, forcing my hands to stop shaking, and focused entirely on the tactical display in front of me. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back now. The first missile strike hit our forward shield array less than 60 seconds after the Krynith fleet opened fire, and the entire command deck shuddered beneath my feet. I grabbed the edge of the console to steady myself, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Around me, officers called out damage reports in clipped, urgent voices, their training keeping panic firmly locked away even as the ship trembled under the impact. "Shields holding at 92%, Sophie Bennett called from her station, her fingers moving rapidly across her display. "Forward array absorbed most of the damage." Admiral Blake stood at the center of the command platform, his expression unreadable, watching the tactical display with the calm focus of a man who had spent decades preparing for this exact moment. "Return fire," he said. "Target their lead cruiser, coordinated strike from squadrons 1 through 4. I watched the display as bright markers representing our fighter squadrons surged forward, moving in patterns far more complex and unpredictable than anything I had studied in Concord tactical manuals. The Krynith formation, by comparison, moved with rigid, textbook precision, clearly built around the assumption that their opponents would always be technologically inferior. That assumption was about to cost them dearly. "Direct hits on their lead cruiser," Sophie reported, a note of controlled excitement entering her voice. "Their shields are buckling faster than projected." On the main screen, I watched as our fighters wove between incoming defensive fire, executing maneuvers that seemed almost impossible, given the ship classes involved. Elena had explained during training that human pilots trained differently than most Concord species, using intensive simulation programs that pushed reaction times and creative problem-solving far beyond what most alien flight academies considered necessary. It was working exactly as intended. The Krynith lead cruiser shuddered under a coordinated strike, its shields collapsing entirely under the pressure of overlapping fire patterns. A cheer rippled quietly across parts of the command deck, quickly silenced by the need to remain focused. "Their commander is adjusting formation," Blake observed, studying the tactical display. "He is finally realizing this will not be the easy victory he expected." I watched as the Krynith fleet shifted, abandoning their earlier rigid advance in favor of a more defensive posture. It was too little, too late. Our ships had already established firing solutions across nearly a third of their formation, exploiting weaknesses in their shield harmonics that our engineers had studied for years in preparation for exactly this scenario. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Endeavour Squadron 7, the communications officer called out. "They report enemy reinforcements emerging from transit space, bearing 270. Blake's expression sharpened slightly. "How many ships?" "Estimated 40 additional vessels," the officer replied. "Configuration suggests a secondary strike force, likely intended to flank our position." "They are not giving up easily," Elena murmured beside me. "No," Blake agreed, "but neither are we." He turned toward the tactical officer. "Redirect reserve squadrons to intercept the flanking force. I want them engaged before they reach effective firing range of our main formation." Orders flowed rapidly across the command deck, and I watched as previously hidden reserve squadrons emerged from carefully concealed positions near a nearby asteroid field, moving swiftly to intercept the newly arrived Kryneth reinforcements. It was another piece of humanity's long, patient preparation finally paying off, a defensive strategy built around anticipating exactly this kind of tactical response. The battle raged on, each passing minute bringing fresh reports of damage, tactical shifts, and small but meaningful victories that slowly, steadily, turned the tide in our favor. I found myself fully absorbed in the rhythm of command deck operations, relaying messages, cross-checking sensor data, and occasionally offering input based on my recent diplomatic knowledge of Kryneth communication protocols. It was during one such exchange that the Endeavour shuddered violently, far more forcefully than any previous impact. "Direct hit to secondary hull section," Sophie called out, her voice tightening with concern. "We have a hull breach on deck 14. "Casualties?" Blake asked immediately. There was a brief pause before Sophie answered, her voice noticeably softer. "Confirmed losses in the affected section, Admiral. Emergency teams are responding now." The command deck fell into a heavy, momentary silence. I felt my stomach drop, the reality of the situation settling in fully for the first time. This was not a training simulation. Real people were being hurt, real lives were being lost, on both sides of this battle that had been decades in the making. Blake's jaw tightened, though his voice remained steady when he spoke again. "Continue operations. We honor them by finishing this properly." I forced myself to focus, pushing aside the wave of emotion threatening to overwhelm my concentration, and returned my attention to the tactical display. The Kryneth flanking force was being systematically dismantled by our reserve squadrons, their confident advance reduced to a chaotic, desperate retreat within a matter of minutes. "Kryneth lead cruiser is falling back," Sophie reported, a note of cautious hope entering her voice. "Their formation is breaking apart across multiple sectors." Blake studied the tactical display carefully, watching as the once confident crimson markers scattered in increasingly disorganized patterns. "Continue pressing our advantage," he said, "but hold defensive positions near Earth's orbital boundary. We do not need to chase a retreating force. We need them to survive long enough to report exactly what happened here today." I understood immediately what he meant. This battle was never solely about defending Earth, though that remained the most important objective. It was also about sending an unmistakable message to the rest of the galaxy, a message that would travel back to Emperor Voraxis and beyond, forcing every Concord member to reconsider everything they believed about humanity. Over the next several minutes, the remaining Kryneth forces disengaged entirely, retreating in a chaotic scramble back toward transit space, their earlier confidence completely shattered. Our fleet held position, allowing them to withdraw rather than pursuing further losses on either side. As the last enemy vessel vanished from our sensors, a heavy, exhausted silence settled over the command deck, quickly followed by a wave of quiet, controlled relief. "Enemy fleet has fully withdrawn from the system," Sophie confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "We held the line." Blake exhaled slowly, some of the tension finally leaving his shoulders. "Casualty reports?" The reports that followed were sobering, a reminder that even a victory carried real cost. Several ships had sustained significant damage, and though our losses were far lighter than the Kryneth fleet's, they were not zero. I thought again of the crew lost on deck 14, faces I would never know, families who would soon receive devastating news. Elena moved to stand beside me, her expression a careful mixture of relief and quiet grief. "First contact battles are never clean," she said softly. "No matter how well prepared you are, I nodded, unable to find the right words to respond. Blake turned to address the entire command deck, his voice carrying clearly across the room. Today, humanity revealed a truth the galaxy has waited decades to learn, he said. We are not weak, we never were, but strength without wisdom is meaningless, and I hope everyone in this room remembers exactly what that strength cost us today. A respectful silence followed his words, broken only by the quiet hum of the ship's systems, slowly returning to standard operational status. I looked out through the main viewport at the empty space where the Krynith fleet had retreated, then toward the distant, blue marble of Earth, safe for now, though I understood with complete certainty that this was only the beginning of something much larger. Emperor Varaxis had called humanity weak in front of the entire galaxy. Today, we had answered him. But as I watched the last traces of battle debris drift silently through the void, I could not shake the feeling that his answer, when it finally came, would be far more dangerous than anything we had faced today. The Concord Assembly Hall felt different when I walked through its doors 3 weeks later, though nothing about the room itself had physically changed. The same polished floors stretched beneath my boots. The same domed ceiling arched high overhead, hung with the same translation crystals that had amplified Emperor Varaxis's dismissive words during my last visit. Yet everything about how the delegates looked at me had shifted completely. Where I once walked through quiet corridors barely noticed by passing diplomats, now dozens of eyes tracked my every movement, filled with a mixture of curiosity, respect, and in some cases, poorly concealed apprehension. I no longer wore the plain gray uniform of a minor attaché. Instead, I stood before the assembly in the formal dress uniform of a decorated fleet officer, a small but unmistakable symbol of everything that had changed since Earth's fleet revealed itself to the galaxy. I made my way toward the center of the chamber, where the full Concord Council had gathered for an emergency session, called specifically to address what news channels across 100 worlds were now calling the Krynith withdrawal. My footsteps echoed clearly through a hall that had fallen almost completely silent at my arrival. At the raised platform where Varaxis once sat with such confident authority, a different figure now occupied the central seat, a representative from the neutral Threnari cluster, who had been appointed temporary chair, while the Concord investigated the full details of the failed Krynith invasion attempt. Officer Cross, the chair said, inclining her head respectfully, the Council thanks you for accepting our invitation to speak today. I stepped forward, standing exactly where I had stood 3 weeks earlier, though everything about the moment felt entirely different this time. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, my voice steady and clear. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates as I began to speak, recounting the details of the battle that had already spread across Concord news networks, in fragmented, often exaggerated versions. I gave them the true account instead, describing humanity's decades-long preparation, the careful decision to remain quiet rather than provoke unnecessary conflict, and the difficult choice to finally reveal our true capabilities only when our survival demanded it. Humanity did not seek this confrontation, I said, addressing the full chamber. We spent generations hoping it would never become necessary. But when Emperor Varaxis declared our species unworthy of this council and moved his fleet against us without provocation, we chose to defend ourselves rather than accept occupation. A representative from the Ver Collective raised a clawed hand, requesting permission to speak. The chair granted it with a small nod. Many of us believed the reports of a hidden human fleet were exaggerated propaganda, the Ver representative said, clicking his mandibles thoughtfully. Yet Krynith survivors confirm your forces demonstrated tactical sophistication far beyond anything documented in your species' public history. How does a civilization hide something of this scale for so many decades? I considered the question carefully before answering. Necessity taught us patience, I said. Our species learned, through painful early experience, that revealing weakness in this galaxy invites exploitation. Rather than pretending strength we did not yet possess, we chose instead to build genuine strength, quietly, patiently, until the moment finally arrived, when hiding it further would cost us more than revealing it. The chamber fell into thoughtful silence, delegates from dozens of species clearly reconsidering long-held assumptions about humanity's place among them. A new voice spoke from near the back of the hall, sharp and cold, immediately recognizable despite the noticeable strain now present within it. A clever story, Emperor Voraxis said, stepping forward from where he had been seated among the Kryneth delegation, his silver features tight with barely controlled anger. But deception remains deception, regardless of how patiently it was constructed. I turned to face him directly, refusing to allow his presence to unsettle me the way it once might have. Deception implies dishonesty, I said. We never claimed to be weak, Your Eminence. We simply allowed others to assume it, while quietly preparing to prove otherwise, if the need ever arose. Voraxis's eyes narrowed. You humiliated my fleet before the entire galaxy. Your fleet humiliated itself, I replied evenly, the moment it chose invasion over diplomacy. A few scattered murmurs of approval rippled through the assembly, and I noticed several delegates who had once eagerly supported Voraxis's earlier proposal, now shifting uncomfortably in their seats, clearly reconsidering their previous alignment with the Kryneth Dominion. The chair raised a hand, calling the chamber back to order. The council will now vote on the emergency motion before us, she said, regarding formal condemnation of the Kryneth Dominion's unprovoked military action against a fellow Concord member. The voting process unfolded quickly, delegate after delegate casting their support in favor of the motion, until the final tally left absolutely no doubt about where the galaxy's sympathies now rested. Voraxis stood rigidly through the entire process, his expression darkening with each additional vote cast against him. When the final results were announced, confirming a formal condemnation, alongside the immediate suspension of several Kryneth trade privileges, Voraxis turned and departed the chamber without another word, his personal guards following closely behind him, leaving behind a heavy, charged silence. I remained standing at the center of the hall, watching him go, feeling a strange mixture of vindication and quiet unease. Something told me this would not be the last time our paths crossed. Elena found me later that evening, standing alone on a private observation deck overlooking the star-filled expanse beyond the Concord station. She joined me quietly, saying nothing for several long moments, as we both watched distant lights flicker against the endless darkness. You did well today, she finally said. It did not feel like a full victory, I admitted. We lost people, real people, with families waiting for them back home. Elena nodded solemnly. War never offers clean victories, even when the outcome favors the right side. She paused, studying my expression carefully. But because of what happened these past few weeks, Earth's future is far safer than it was a month ago. That matters, Daniel. It matters enormously. I thought about everything that had changed since Voraxis first called humanity weak in this very station. The secret fleet, hidden for decades, now stood openly among the stars, respected, and, in some circles, genuinely feared. Earth's place within the Concord had been permanently secured, no longer dependent on quiet diplomacy alone, but reinforced by demonstrated strength few species could easily dismiss. Yet I also understood, with quiet certainty, that Voraxis would not simply accept this outcome and retreat peacefully into irrelevance. Emperors rarely forgave public humiliation so easily, and something in his eyes during today's assembly told me he was already planning his next move. What happens now? I asked Elena. Now, she said, humanity takes its true place among the stars, openly, for the first time in our history. She smiled slightly, though it did not fully reach her eyes. And we remain ready, because I doubt very much that Voraxis intends to let this defeat stand unanswered. I nodded slowly, understanding completely. Whatever peace we had secured today was fragile, temporary, built upon the uneasy foundation of a wounded emperor's pride. Still, as I looked out at the stars, I felt something I had not allowed myself to feel in a very long time: hope. Humanity had spent decades hiding in the shadows, quietly building strength, while the rest of the galaxy assumed us fragile and insignificant. Today, we stepped fully into the light, not as conquerors seeking dominance, but as a species finally standing tall enough to protect what mattered most. Emperor Voraxis called us weak. He would spend the rest of his reign discovering exactly how wrong he had been, and somewhere out in the vast darkness beyond the Concord's borders, I suspected we had not yet heard the last of him. For now, though, Earth was safe. Our fleet stood proudly among the stars for the first time in history, no longer hidden, no longer underestimated. And I intended to make absolutely certain it stayed that way.